Okay, we are live and in action here today. I am very excited. This has been a conversation that I've been looking forward to having for many months. Today, I get the pleasure of bringing in Leon VanderPol to just be here with us in conversation and talk about some really powerful work. Leon is the founder of the Center for Transformational Coaching. He is the author of a wonderful book called A Shift in Being, which I think is my most purchased book of the year. I gift it to coaching clients as it's not a mandatory read, but I give it to them, as a part of our journey together. And I'm just so excited to have you here, Leon, and for the opportunity to get to share you with the people that are of my world today.
Oh, that is fantastic to hear. All of that. Thank you. Thank you for having me. And you're right. We have been planning this for many, many months. Maybe even
Hmm.
going back to last summer when you and I had a chance to
Yes.
walk by the lake, chatting about all things, kind of the seed planted for this conversation today.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll just share that brief story. So, funny enough, my family was in the process of moving to a town in British Columbia, Canada, called Kelowna, and Leon and we came into conversation last year. I actually remember because the the starting point of our conversation was me requesting that Leon take the book A Shift in Being and make it into an audiobook, which I know that the world is probably greatly craving as well. And that sort of sparked the conversation between us. And sure enough, out of all the places in the world, Leon was actually going to Kelowna, British Columbia, a few months from now. So we got to meet up and spend some time together, which was really, really amazing.
Yeah, yeah, those paths were meant to connect. Our paths
Yeah,
were meant to connect in that
yeah,
small town.
absolutely.
Yeah, really good.
Absolutely. So we got a wonderful agenda to go over tonight, and really we want this conversation to be interactive. So if you're joining us, please feel free to share your comments, your thoughts that your insights that you're taking away, and if you have any questions along the way, please feel free to share them as well. And we'll do our best to bring them into the conversation because I can imagine that the conversation that we're going to have today, people are going to be curious. They're going to
Mm,
have questions that come up of what we're speaking to.
yes, yes. Yeah, please do ask.
Hmm. So the really cool thing, Leon, that I can actually speak to already is that I know that there are people in my world who they've read your book, they've come across your work already, and so the audience is going to be people that are well aware of you and people that maybe aren't maybe are coming across you for the first time,
Yeah.
which is really exciting to be able to share that. And really where I'd love to start is, you know, you, I know actually, a fair amount of your coaching background, and where I'd like to just sort of start us off is, what led you to create the Center for Transformational Coaching, and then, really just the creation of, the Deep Coaching Intensive.
Yeah,
Could you share more about that sort of journey that you went on to bring that into
yeah,
the world?
yeah. It's a really interesting journey that has a kind of parallel but interwoven tracks. One is my own personal journey. You could call it my own personal spiritual and growth journey, kind of interwoven with kind of this: what am I creating in this world? What does my life stand for? What is my work to be? Those are some of the great questions that people who are on what we could call a journey of transformation and awakening are asking themselves. It's kind of a naturally arising questioning of the meaning of life and one's purpose and their work and place in the world. And so that happened very much for me as well, that whole journey. Like I write in the book of what I experienced, but then over time, what I've also observed countless others that I've worked with experience as well. So these patterns emerge. But what gave rise to it. So there's the initial impulse, following what is my work? What is it that I wish to bring to the world? So a long story in a shorter format, I landed in a space that we call the coaching, the field of personal coaching. And I felt quite in love with the field. I felt that there was something in the intimacy of the conversations. I had long had a background in corporate training and corporate organizational development and leadership development and facilitation, that kind of work. But there was something in the coaching conversation that seemed more essential, more real. Perhaps people were being more vulnerable, more open. I kind of fell in love with that. Around that time that I was beginning to learn coaching and use coaching in my own work more, I became a teacher of coaching through another organization. And what I noticed was kind of a gap between what I was teaching in the coaching way, kind of the fundamentals, and the way I was actually working with people. Like, I didn't understand why there was that gap at first. I didn't recognize that I was working with people who are going through what I now call that journey of transformation. I was just noticing that it felt that the things that were called for in those very intimate, very raw and real conversations was not a kind of, options, strategy, action kind of template that more conventional coaching approaches take. And at the same time, I was dabbling in my own spiritual growth is still going here. A lot of my own, questioning and revealing of what's going on. But I was also in that time dabbling in healing. I became very interested in for my own healing. And what I mean by that is just looking at those shadowy aspects of our human nature that stand in the way of us really embodying higher ways of being in this world and actualizing higher potentials. So that shadowy part of our humanity, which we all have, needs attention. And I began to experience different kind of healing modalities. I was lucky to be part of a community. I was living in Taipei in Taiwan at the time. I was part of this kind of international community that a lot of practitioners in the healing arts and facilitation, training, coaching, all were always coming together and conversing. And I met people who were offering a variety of healing modalities. It could be Reiki or EFT, all different kinds, crystal healing, whatever it may be. I said yes to pretty much anything and everything people would offer, paid, free, experiment on me. Let's do this work. But I became fascinated with this idea that healing is an essential part of transformative work. We cannot grow into the fullness of our potential unless we're willing to face the shadowy, sticky, darker aspects of our human nature, face them head on, and do the deeper healing work. And yet the coaching I was teaching was not even going near that. It was often saying, coaches, we don't go there. That's too dark, too in the past, too whatever. It's therapy. And I'm thinking, no, this is not therapy. This is essential work of coaching and transformational work. So I was committing my own self to it. And what happened was, at one point, was I decided, because I had this coaching experience with someone. And I don't know if I've shared this story with you personally, but I'll share it here with the audience because this was a life-defining experience for me. It was that moment I was coaching this woman who then, after like 11 sessions talking about her corporate job and career, suddenly said something like, I was sexually abused as a child by a family friend. And on our final session, she's opening to this deep, raw wound. And me being a new coach with the training of, we don't go there, was in a moment like the deer in the headlights. Like, oh my God, what do I do? So I just went into myself and just quietly asked, okay, what do I do? And the only, awareness that came to me at that moment was just love her, just send her love. You don't have to do anything else. So I sat back in my chair, put my palms up. This was a distance coaching call over the phone. I just radiated love. And after about 10 or 15 minutes, we both kind of settled into this beautiful, rich silence, which felt so much like this two become as one in this state of unified consciousness. I can barely describe the feeling, and we both experienced it. And we both came out of that just wondering what the heck we just experienced, but it felt so nourishing, so healing. And that stayed with me, that there is something in the field of human consciousness which we don't understand, in our connectivity that we don't understand. And it's not that we need to understand it, but we need to bring it into our lives, to use it for our betterment and our growth and our healing and our well-being. So there came a point in my coaching where I was noticing, yeah, there's me coaching people differently than I'm teaching. Their needs are different. There's a need to go into this more shadowy, sticky stuff. And then there is this recognition that to do that, we don't have to have some analytical therapeutic background. What if we just sat in kind of this light of radiant love, or just in the energy of being with all of this? So I began to experiment with my clients. I began to invite them to what I called loosely a light body healing. And I separated it from a coaching session. So I'm going to do a light body healing. We're just going to focus on, let's say, a core limiting belief that you have that is so ingrained in you that is basically part of your self-identity. That you don't know life without this core limiting belief. These are deeply entrenched pieces of our ego-based self-concept that are so in us that, yeah, how do we heal these? How do we outwork these? So I'll give you an example. We talk about in the deep coaching intensive, core limiting beliefs like I'm not good enough, I'm not lovable, I'm not enough, I'm not safe in the world. We carry these. They're so in us that we don't even give thought to them. They're just there, and they frame everything we do. They affect all our perceptions, all our actions, all our attitudes, all of our moment by moment experience. So, okay, bring one of these to the session and let's just do a light body healing, which means I'm going to sit here and just be with that which you're sharing in a kind of open, silent space. And for 2 years, I offered this to people just to see if I was making this stuff up, just to see if, like, am I just dreaming that there's something happening here? But I need some evidence. And session after session, people would say something is going on, something is shifting, something is changing. I could feel it energetically. There's something in my mind, like, okay, something's here. Now, how do I bring this to coaching? How do I bring this thing called coaching and this thing called healing together? And that was the genesis for deep coaching, right? It's this recognition that in transformational work, there is a need to do the deeper healing on those shadowy beliefs, on our patterns of thought, emotion that are limiting us, on the false images we carry, all of that. But the coach doesn't have to have this massive toolkit of all of these things they need to do and analyze and assess and worksheets in order for a person to really lean into and experience healing of these core pieces. So what does that look like in a coaching context? And that's where I say the deep coaching intensive was born. Like, how do I teach this? How could I teach this work to someone else, where we're coaching and bringing in this incredible energy of unified consciousness, of love, of spirit into the session, not in a very obvious way, like I'm saying, this is what we're doing, but it's there. It's present in me. It's present in the space. It's present in the connective tissue, if you will, between us. How is that done? And to do it with such ease and joy that people just feel that they can relax when they're with me, that they can relax everything and simply be who they are, revealing whatever they need to reveal, knowing that it's absolutely safe, that there's zero judgment, there is zero need for things to be different than they are, that there's unbridled acceptance. So that's deep coaching, and that was kind of the genesis of the work.
Yeah, and there's one piece that I've really noticed over these last couple of weeks that even outside of a coaching context that has really been powerful to witness in you has been this element of truly being one in a conversation with the individual across from you, where I think that that when you look at, like, say, the International Coach Federation markers, there is this aspect of like, okay, you know, we're trying to sort of break the boundary of like, okay, there's a coach and there's a client. And what I really noticed about the way that you show up in conversation is like, it's true, as I kind of just spoke to it, like there's truly a oneness. There's no separation between coach and client. That's been really powerful to witness in this practice as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the piece that I would add is like, even for people that aren't coaches, to be able to like, you know, step into that just a little bit more, bringing that oneness, that togetherness in conversation.
Yes.
Anything that
Yeah.
you'd like to speak to in that?
Yeah. It's the idea of what I call positionality. My position, my role is the coach. And here's the
Mhm.
frameworks that I work with. Your role is the coachee. And here's what you must do to be kind of a good coachee. And if we're both playing our roles, we'll have a good conversation. We'll come up with the outcomes that you're looking for. But you're right. When you get into the deeper transformative work, it really helps to drop that positionality. This idea, it doesn't mean that I'm no longer the coach, you're no longer the client, that we're somehow switching these roles. It's not that. It doesn't help to really hold too tightly to it as a role, because if you can recognize that what's in you is in me,
Mm.
and what we're experiencing here together is for both of us. This is not about an outcome for you. It's about what it is that is of our mutually highest good that can transpire in this moment of connection with each other. And I think A Course in Miracles calls it something like a holy moment. Just
Mm.
this moment when two become as one in that unified space. And yes, my role may be to evoke certain things from you or inquire into certain things so that we can reveal what's going on for you at a more essential level. So greater clarity is had, so that you're able to rise within your mind's eye to those moments of inspiration that are there. But I'm not clinging to it being just you. I'm too soaking in the same thing. And what's healing you is healing me. And we've had this in the course too, when we've done group call conversations where there's a group of people observing too. That people come out of that going, oh my goodness, even though I was observing, I was right there in the conversation. I was in it. I was experiencing the energies that you were experiencing. I was not separate. It's like, yeah, that's it, right? I'm not just an observer. I'm dropping that and I'm allowing myself to experience what's of the whole.
Mhm. Yeah, and I can speak to it because I did a publicly recorded coaching conversation, and it was one that I messaged you about, where there was this experience of just holding that space for an individual that was so powerful that after the session I had to go for a walk and just allow like the energy of what happened to just like sit and radiate, and because
Yeah.
it was such a powerful experience for me as well. And um again, and that's why I love speaking to it, both for coaches but also for individuals who are just having conversations with their spouse, or supporting their kids, or people, supporting people at their work, that like there is this connectedness that we can all embody that is just so powerful. And I think it really does speak to, you know the greatness of this kind of human evolution, this human consciousness, that like we can be this deep with one another.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. And it requires us to gain the capacity to do that. So
Hmm.
it's true. That is not something that we necessarily teach in school. And we
Hmm.
spend so much of our days in what we could call the mental state and the emotional state, or the mental and emotional, those two bodies of our existence. We spend so much time there thinking, 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 feeling, 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 that we don't often move into that kind of next body or state. I was just having a conversation yesterday with Julie Cloutier, who is going to be doing a course on the five koshas. And so she was
Mm.
speaking about the emotional body and the mental body. And they named two of the other bodies, one being the wisdom body and then the other being the bliss body. So these are very subtle bodies, very, very subtle bodies. You could call them energetic bodies that we carry and we have access to. They're in us, but they're not ones that are as kind of present as the intellect, thinking mind body or the emotional body, which we're so very aware of. They're very subtle bodies, the wisdom body. And then this idea of the bliss body, just this all encompassing, very, very, you might say, subtle, ethereal piece of us that just is pure, pure joy, pure bliss, pure beingness, pure radiance, pure light. So in between that, there's this wisdom body, and that piece requires us to get out of the thinking mind and much more into the sensing space. The
Mm-hmm.
sensing what is alive in me now, sensing my relationship with all that is, sensing the connection of things, sensing my connection with you. Like that is a kind of muscle that we can develop and build. We can call it the wisdom body, but just the idea to sense, and that's so much then what transformational work invites. Never mind the coaching piece, just when we're on a transformational journey, we are learning to move out of the thinking and the habit of thinking and trying to figure out and solve and make better and have solutions, because so much of transformation, we've talked about this, is this disruption to our idea of who we are. It feels very uncomfortable. The first thing we want to do is solve that. Can't be good. It's uncomfortable. So how do we move from then thinking about our experience, our existence, to simply sensing into the connectivity, into the reality, into the oneness, into what's alive in me?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's when you speak to that, I'm like halfway there. you know, like like there's well, I think there's such a great it's a bit different, but so I'm not going to dive into that. But there's a part of me that's very much still in the thinking mind, and a part of me that's moving into more of that heart space, that sensing space, and it's such an interesting dynamic to be with both,
To
and
be with
and
both,
just
right?
yeah,
Yeah, it's not about getting rid of one.
yeah,
The mental body, the mental being, is vital to our existence. I
mm-hmm,
mean, it is that which gives structure and order to our lives. It allows us to label things and make connections between things. And, it's absolutely invaluable. But we get locked there because we are taught from a young age that that is the key to success. Your
mm-hmm,
capacity to use your intellect to create, to grow, to make things happen, to solve the problems of the world. That's the key. If you can do that well, your success is guaranteed, kind of thinking. So we all lean into it very early on. Very early on. We're not taught how to just be still and just sense that deep listening sense into ourselves, first of all, what's alive there, and then into the broader connective tissue, our relationship with the world. But as you said, the pathway of the heart is what takes us there.
mm-hmm,
It's related to the heart's intelligence. I don't mean this physical heart. I mean the spiritual heart, the bigger encompassing
mm-hmm.
intelligence of the heart that takes us there.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the pieces that there's definitely more I want to speak to in terms of the practices that you've brought in, like that are in the book, A Shift in Being. But before we dive into that, I'd love to hear, you know, what was the experience of actually creating those practices? How, what led you to, choose those nine specifically, and like how did that formulate?
That is a great question that even I sit and look at sometimes in wonder. I don't have a very clear answer. I wish I could, in a sense, just say, well, it was just this and this. Here's my process. I'm not altogether certain. What I do know is that there were many, many, many hours through my own journey of sitting down and just doing reflective writing. When the idea for the course came out, there were many times when I just sat down and wrote down ideation, just whatever was there. And at some point, and I cannot say how or when, this idea of practices dropped in. The idea of transformative practices. Okay. So I started to write down. I think I still have pieces of paper where I've got 15, 20, 25 just ideas. But again, how those practices became the nine, how I made the distinction between what was in and what was out, or what needed to be combined, that discerning piece, it was kind of a honing, or I don't know how it happened. Andrew, I wish I could say it. Just I know one day I had nine, and nine felt like a good number. And they seemed to encompass. The order was a little different when I started the course, but in the practices themselves have not really changed since those original nine. I mean, they could have. They could have said, well, that one didn't really fit, and tossed it, and taken another one. But they were the nine, and they've stayed the nine till today, 10, 11 years later. So it was just a practice of really always just going within, asking the deep questions, and then just writing stuff out, and just allowing myself, in a sense, to be guided, or using my intuition. This is what stays. This is what's needed. This is what's meaningful. The whole course was developed that way. When I first developed the course, I just had this idea that I'll have one small reading module for each of the practices. And I launched the first course before I had written any of them. I only had the 9 practices, and I launched the course with the thought, and I had gotten this from a coaching conversation I had with my coach, was, well, you can just write the module for that practice in between the 2 classes. So you're writing them. Well, I thought, what a great idea. I don't have to have anything prepared at the beginning of the course that I just sold. And off I went. And for 9 weeks, I would, at times a bit urgently, try to write this. I would head down to a cafe, like a Starbucks or whatever it was nearby. I would pound away the afternoon until I had 2 or 3 pages that kind of fleshed out the practice in detail. And then I would ship it the next week in class. That was it. Intuitive writing. I mean, I really didn't have time to think a lot about it. It was just, okay, this is the practice. What does it mean? This is what I think it means. Dump that on paper, spell check, off it went. Probably a lot of grammar mistakes and still, but that was how it was shipped. A very intuitive, just kind of flow process.
Well, and it's, again, that's the creator in you to, the experience I have of the practices is like, wow, like the flow of them. And, I'll speak to it both for coaches and for folks that aren't even in coaching, that, if you were just to go and pick up the book, the practices are so beautiful. I mean, like they don't have to be looked at. You could go into the book, pick a practice, and practice with it.
Yes.
And as coaches, I think the thing that's been profound is that you start with practice one, slowing it all down, and going sequentially in through the practices. It can really support in guiding your coaching conversations from beginning to end. And that to me has always been fascinating, that that's how you created it.
Yeah. And to be honest, Andrew, that recognition of the flow and the connectivity between the practices wasn't there when I first wrote them down. It took a couple of years of me teaching the work and refining the work for the way that flow transpired to really reveal itself. So the work got richer over time. But I just want to make a comment on transformative practice for those people who are watching, because it's helpful to understand that, Andrew mentioned, let's say, the first practice of just really slowing everything down, slow it all down, really begin to sync with it, with a rhythm of life that is deeply natural and aligned to you. Sorry, you're hearing that. That's a jet flying overhead. We have those here in Taiwan. The fighter jets are circling to protect us all from, our neighbor. Yep. The point of the practices is that they serve a context, and this is really what's so vital for not just for coaching, but for life. Those people on a transformative path who really desire to grow into new ways of being, into a more, let's say, enlightened, awakened self. And many people are on this path. Many people are on a path of wanting to know who they are at an essential level. These practices are about creating a set of conditions that support that journey. I say these practices taken together create the optimal conditions in which transformation can unfold with the greatest amount of ease and joy. because transformation is definitely not always easeful and it's definitely not always joyful. So the practices create conditions. So people say to me, well, Leon, my life is so full, so busy, so I don't have time to slow down. If I slow down, well, my life will collapse. I won't get things done. I won't be as productive. And they just, in their mind's eye, play out a series of events that lead to them somehow being homeless on the streets. The mind
Hmm.
can do that. So that creates the fear. And then the fear keeps them from leaning into a practice like, well, what would it look like to slow your whole life down? So it becomes more spacious, more flowing, more at ease. Okay. So the practice, they say, well, I don't have time for it. And that's true. You might not, given the way that you've configured your life and the values and priorities you have. So if your value and priority, let's say, is to advance your career, okay, you might notice that with that at the top, you need to be very productive, very busy. You need to put in long days, and you've got to make sure that everything else in your life is attended to just in the evenings and on the weekends. So those are packed as well. And it's go, go, go. Plus, I want to have vacation. Plus, I want to have time for myself. Plus. Okay. But that's a certain priority set that says career and advancement is my priority right now. And
Hmm.
therefore, my values fall out underneath that. But if I put my own growth and my own transformation at the very top, or we could say at the very center of my existence, where I say and commit that there is nothing more important in the world than for me to commit to my own personal growth and transformation, that's when these practices say, well, ta-da, we are here. The 9 practices then create the conditions which optimize people's growth into these new ways that they desire for themselves. And that's all. They create a set of conditions to accelerate a process that without those conditions in place can go actually very slow. I've talked about this before, maybe with you, that for many people, a normal arc of transformative growth is a 15 to 20-year process. Let's say it's 10 to 20 years, somewhere in there. You're
Hmm.
like, wow, that's a really long time, Leon. It's like, yes, but it can go on for even longer. Some
Hmm.
people never actually move beyond it in life because they've just spent a lifetime dabbling with their spiritual and personal growth instead of really putting it at the center. Oh, I'll go to a weekend workshop, I'll take a course, I'll read a book, and it gives me some inspiration, but I'm not really, really committed to understanding what it means to awaken to the fullness of myself. I'm not really committed because there's too much at risk, maybe if I do. I'm putting too much of what I've created at jeopardy, I believe. So, or life is good. Life is good. I don't need to rock the boat. Life is good. I've got everything material I need. Life is good. Okay. But for those people who want to put it at the core, you can accelerate the process.
Hmm.
And that's where these practices come in. They teach people how to create conditions that accelerate a process that might otherwise take a very long scope of time. And like I said, for some people in this lifetime, they never actually move beyond the level of consciousness that they kind of were born into and that they've carried for a lifetime. They never go beyond it.
Hmm.
So that's the context of the practices and why we do things like slow it all down and reconfigure our life to a different rhythm, because that is optimal for self-reflection and self-growth.
Yeah, and one piece that I can imagine people would be curious about is like, okay, um, you know, what does that mean to make transformation sort of the core of our lives? How would I start to take some steps towards that, given I've got a job and a
Mm,
family and all these commitments? Where could I start to lean in to making transformation, the central part of my life with everything
yes,
else that's around me?
going on, right. And this is someone I read once used the phrase everyday awakening. I thought that's really apt because it's not this idea that somehow that to really commit means that I must drop everything, perhaps don some different clothes and go to India for a year and
Mm-hmm.
sit in an ashram at the feet of a guru. And then, because I've made that much time and space, I shall find that which I seek. And for most people, that's not going to work. We're not going to have the time or the energy to go off on long voyages of self discovery and just drop everything. That might work for
Mm-hmm.
some, but not for all. So how do we bring this into our daily lives? You're right, life is full. So for me, it starts with what I mentioned earlier. It starts getting really crystal clear on what your priorities are in life. Because if you ever want to know what your priorities are, simply look at what you're doing with your time and energy. It's that simple. And sometimes what we say our priorities are not what they really are when we look at what we do with our time and energy. Now, I've worked with many coaching clients who they've said, well, Leon, I've read the 9 practices and I'd like to work through these 9 practices. And they don't move beyond the first practice.
Mm-hmm.
Weeks, months later, they still kind of cycle through that same because they come up against, well, what really are your priorities? And at the end of the day, they choose not their own personal growth. They choose my children's growth and well-being, my business and its well-being, or my employees and their well-being, or my family and my mother and father who need me, and other people's well-being become priority. And this is not about right or wrong. I'm not judging it. It's you're just noticing, how am I spending my time and energy really? And that's really what I'm prioritizing in my life today. So it begins with that. Get crystal clear on what you're truly saying is important to you right now without judgment about it being right or wrong. But it does help to notice, is this really how I want to spend my time and energy? Is this what my deepest part of me is calling for? Is this what my soul yearns for? Or am I denying that part of myself because I believe that these other things are more important, because I feel responsible for other people's lives and their well being? Am I overlooking my own core needs? It's a very vital question to have and to be so honest with yourself, because it's so easy to be in a bit of denial about these things,
Mm-hmm.
right? To deny even how much our conditioning growing up plays a role in how we choose to spend our time and energy. If we're taught from a young age that good people care about others, good people sacrifice themselves for the well-being of others. That's what good people do. That's what it means to be a good, helpful person. Let's say that little thought has been planted in me from a very young age. Well, then it gets confusing because I'm doing what I think is right. I'm doing helping others. So how can this be? It's not about wrong. It's okay, but I'm ignoring or overlooking the most vital piece, which is committing to my own personal growth and creating the time and the space, which means being then able to say, well, if I reprioritize, what are the tough conversations I might need to be
Mm-hmm.
having with people who are used to me showing up a certain way, who have expectations about me being a certain way with them, doing certain things. So that's the way I've always shown up. That's what I've always stood for. And suddenly now I'm saying no to that. Well, those people are going to react. So there's some tough conversations that need to happen with people who do not want you to change at all. They have a vested interest in you staying exactly the way you are.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So this is where it begins. Prioritization and recognizing really, what are your priorities? What are you denying in yourself? What are you not giving yourself? And then the process of beginning to reconfigure your life. If you say, no, it's time. It is time to put myself and my growth at the center of my life. What does that look like? What does that really mean on a practical day-to-day level? What do I need to say no to? What do I need to say yes to? What do I need to completely let go of? Those kind of difficult questions. This is where the deep coach comes in so handy, right? Because we do
Mm-hmm.
this is what we do. We have these tough, honest conversations where we can tap into what's really true and right and make decisions from that place, from that knowing, and act with courage and strength from that place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Um, So doing a little bit of a time jump here, I'll call it a time
Yeah,
jump, but looking at, you know, this is the beauty of getting to do an interview on an area that I'm sort of stepping into, which would be practice 9. Cultivating trust and the mystery and magic of transformation. And
yeah,
the cool thing is you've spoken to it in little inklings in the conversation already about the mystery of this work. Um, and I guess really the place that I'm curious about in this is, how does one continue, like, practice into this? How does one, just really truly step into the mystery and magic of transformation?
Yes. Well, the vital word in that process, that practice, is trust. Cultivate trust in the mystery and magic of transformation. And trust at that level is very challenging for people. And this goes back to the dynamics of transformation. And I know you know this, but I'll just share it. The dynamic of transformation is that it is a highly disruptive process. It can literally feel like things are falling apart, like my life is falling apart. I no longer understand what's going on. I'm confused. I'm disoriented. I'm a little bit fearful about what it all means. That disruptive process is absolutely functional, although it feels actually dysfunctional.
Hmm.
So when something in our lives feels utterly dysfunctional, we have been taught, naturally as creatures of comfort, to figure out how to make things go comfortably again. So what this practice of cultivating trust in the mystery of magic is, you may not understand why your life feels like it's falling apart. You may not understand what's going on, truly what's going on, because we cannot, with our limited little perceptual mind, contemplate the scale of human consciousness and what it's all involved in. To trust that dysfunction, meaning that you have to lean into it, not run away from it. And to trust that there will be things that you cannot ever comprehend about your human existence that are actually happening for you and within you. And that's the piece that people tend to balk at. They'll say, well, I can trust some things if I can sort of see why it's going on. But if I don't know the why, I don't know. I don't know. Or they'll say things, I love this question of who do you trust? And they'll say, well, I trust the universe. I trust life. But I don't actually trust my husband very much, or my spouse, or my
Mm.
employer, or my boss. I don't really trust them to do right
Hmm.
by me. Oh, so you trust the universe, which is everything, but you won't trust the specifics within the universe. And then they see that contradiction. Okay.
Hmm.
So we have all these barriers to trust on kind of on more of a micro level, but we'll say, well, I trust the macro. Okay.
Blanket
There's,
statement.
right,
Yeah.
blanket statement, right? So there's a contradiction
Yeah.
there that we have to look at. Yeah.
Yeah.
That piece of trust, that cultivation of it
Mm.
is for most people just exceedingly challenging. And yet it is the kind of glue that binds, if you will.
Hmm.
That if we could trust, what's that one practice? What's that one tenet? Our individually calibrated divine curriculum. Okay, remember the individually calibrated divine curriculum is always working for our highest good.
Mm.
To me, that's just massive. That means
Hmm.
it's individually calibrated just for me. It's a divine curriculum, meaning I didn't get to choose this curriculum. It's there, it's life's curriculum, but it's calibrated to me. It's always working for my highest good, no matter what seems. No matter what seems. Well, lean into that for a while because then every single thing that we've ever judged as negative in our life suddenly can't be a negative anymore.
Hmm.
It can only be a lesson calibrated just for me, just for you to learn and grow from. Can you trust that? Well, I don't know, Andrew. That's a pretty big ask. Right?
It's one of those things. It's like you can take all your personal development books and throw them away. You just need that one line right there,
Exactly.
to that's the practice right there, to like truly to allow that to sink in. It's like, can you trust that, like, your circumstance, what is in your world right now is all calibrated for your greatest good. That's
It's huge, isn't it? Right?
huge.
And that's why we call it a practice because it's something like a muscle that we have to work out. Because just when we think we've got it mastered, oh yeah, I got this trust thing. I trust it all. Something will happen. Life just pokes us like, there's a sore spot. Let's just to see
Yeah.
a little test. Yeah, just to see how
Yeah.
much you trust. And then well, why do bad things keep happening to me? I'm doing everything right. I've done
Hmm.
everything I'm supposed to do. Bad things keep happening. It's just life going, yeah, you think you got the trust thing? Try that one. Here's another test.
Yeah, for sure. Um, oh, there's something I was going to speak to there. No, it'll come back. Oh, no, yeah, I got it. And I think that like that has been one piece of being in the deep coaching intensive that I've really loved has been um, just allowing the energy of the space, the energy of spirit, the energy of universe into your world. And I mean, again, like for some people that's probably like, okay, like that, what, well, that's not very new, right? But like truly, um there's almost like that, the trust right there of like, I can speak from personal experience. I am somebody that likes to control my world. I like to, I guess in a sense, like how my life has been is very much like what I see is my world. And I think that such a beautiful element of the deep coaching intensive has been, can you trust what is happening energetically in the world, the things that you can't see, maybe even
Yes.
like the what can you trust that what's going to happen for you 5 years from now is in process. That to me has been such magical work, as a
Yeah.
part of being in this experience.
That's just a huge statement, isn't it? Can I trust that what's happening for me 5 years from now, what will happen to me 5 years from now, is in process today?
Hmm.
Can you trust that? Meaning, what's happening for you today began how long
Mm.
ago? This very
Yeah,
moment, this very
yeah,
experience
absolutely.
began how long ago?
Yeah,
No, we like
5 years more.
5 years more, right?
Yeah,
Seeds planted, dots connected, as Steve Jobs would say, connecting those dots, right?
yeah.
And not just in terms of placement, in terms of a house or a career,
Hmm.
but in terms of your very life experience. The way that you experience life right now is because of what has been planted years past.
Hmm.
So, what would you like life to be experienced as that you can plant the seeds of today? Because it might not be that just this moment you're going to experience it just like that, though you might,
Hmm.
but it might be like, I need to start planting those seeds. I want to experience more joy, more fulfillment, more connection, more better relationships. I want to be more loving, more aware, more accepting, more allowing, more gracious, more kind, more courteous, whatever it may be. I want to be
Hmm.
that. I want to radiate that in the world. I want that to be an expression of who I am, because this is what the world needs, these authentically oriented, self expressed human beings that are living openly, creatively, lovingly. Yeah. Just in that, far more peaceful state than we find ourselves. And the seeds for that are planted now. Am I
Hmm.
experiencing myself the way I want to? Let's talk about the bliss body again, right? Those,
Hmm.
how many people can say every day there's a moment or moments where I am just in awe. I am just in love. I'm just gazing at the magnificence of life. Like, wow. And I bet if you looked at the majority of humanity, most would say, doesn't actually cross
Hmm.
very often the plane of awareness.
Yeah.
But for those who say, it's not that I want to live on a park bench, blissed out, unable to do anything, but I wouldn't mind if each day there were that moment
Hmm.
when I just knew that the ultimate potential of life is radiant joy. And I can just touch that, and that permeates through me, and then it affects everything I touch, everything I say, everything I do is now connected to that moment of joy, because that is who I am.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Yeah. 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 Thanks for speaking to it. Um, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. It's just an beautiful embodiment of the world that we can create, the person that we can be, in this world.
Yes.
Um, so a couple more places just to look before we start to wind down. I know we got to talk a little bit about this last summer when we were together, but I'm curious, what's next for you? What's on the horizon for you in terms of, what you're creating or what you're interested in? I don't get to hear about that too much, so I'm
Yes.
just curious.
Well, it's a very interesting time for me. It's a bit of a transitional time for me. And I cannot clearly answer the what's next for me. As you know, one big piece is that I'll be moving to Canada and will be your neighbor starting next
Hmm.
month, like literally
Literally
the same
next
town.
door.
Next door. I found the house right next to yours. They
Yeah,
banging on your door daily. What's
yeah.
for breakfast,
Looking
Andrew?
forward
Let
to
me in.
it.
Yeah, that's a big piece
Hmm.
because I've lived abroad for 30 years. And I'm not necessarily sure what it all means for me in terms of that relocation. I mean, I can speculate, but I haven't lived in North America, though the people that I work with are primarily, not solely by any means, but primarily based in North America. But I work with people from all over the world. But I've done it from Taiwan for a very long time, and much of it has been virtual.
Hmm.
So I have the sense that by arriving in North America, being present and living there, that opportunities may arise to do more work in person with people than I've had a chance to do for some time, which I look
Hmm.
forward to because there is something in the connection of just being with people versus the virtual world. And that proximity piece gives me access to different kinds of collaborations and partnerships that, although today I can't say this is what it will be, are always an extension of this work that we're talking about here today in some form.
Hmm.
So bringing it, so I suspect that piece, yeah, it's on the horizon, though the specifics I cannot say.
Hmm.
Another piece that I'm working on is, a shift in being. There has been some, yeah, the audiobook request. It's on the priority list, just near the bottom. The other piece that has come about over the years has been, what if you take this work and make it not for the coaching context, but for another context? And one of the contexts that has been requested over and over is what we're calling the leadership context.
Hmm.
How does this work for leadership? Now, I don't like to work with the narrow definition of leadership as in people who run a business or people who work in corporates, which is very often when people think of leadership, at least here in Asia, where I've lived, when people think of leadership, they immediately think of people who lead corporate. Okay. But that's a very narrow definition of leadership. Leadership can be anyone who leads people in some way, from NGOs to teachers to parents. It's anybody. So let's use this very broad definition of leadership. Anybody who can see themselves leading others in some capacity. So I'm currently rewriting the book, not a full rewrite, not a different book, but rewriting the book for a leadership context. So a shift in being, and instead of being for deep transformational coaching, it's going to be something like a guidebook for what I am today calling evolutionary leadership. Evolutionary leadership, which is what happens when we go on this journey of transformation for ourselves, where we really enable that. And we notice that when the paradigm of our experience shifts, we start to create differently in the world. We start to let go of a lot of the conventional ideas about how leadership should be and how businesses should be created, or entities of any kind, any organizational life. And we start to create them from a far different mindset, a one that is pretty advanced and unknown by most. But it reveals itself as we go on this transformational journey. It simply arises in the awakened mind. It's not something we have to seek out, it's there. So the book will be about supporting people who say, well, yes, I see myself as a leader in some capacity, to go on this journey of transformation for themselves and then bring it in some ways, known only to them, to the organizations and entities that they are part of in their experience. So this is the rewrite that I'm doing of the book in the sense for that new audience or that new context. And then the coursework will follow that. So that's a big piece that's going to take place through the rest of this year.
That's excellent. I mean,
Yeah.
I can already, a lot of the conversations that I've been in, a lot of the conversations, some of the conversations I've been in of late have been, for folks that, it's been interesting because, say for clients who they've been coached, they've been coached for a period of time. they obviously, it has an impact on them,
Mm,
the dynamics of coaching, and then they're often in leadership positions, and it's so cool because there's sort of this draw to like, oh, I can see how, you know coaching could really benefit my leadership. And so, what I think is so impactful there is just like, having this work accessible, even just from a leadership capacity. Not, you don't
yeah,
necessarily have to be in the coaching space, but like, these practices, this way of being, can support you in developing your leadership. Like, what an
that's it.
opportunity.
That's it. It's just grounded in the shift in the being. Like,
Yeah.
who am I being in this world? Not even just as a leader, who am I being? And
Hmm.
how do I carry that into these spaces and places that I lead others? And then how does that impact the way that I engage with others? How does it impact what I create? How does that impact the way I think the business should operate?
Hmm.
And it is a paradigm shift from models of business and organizational development, often based on competition or profit, to ones that have a far deeper understanding of their own evolutionary purpose as an organization, which transcends the thing that it makes or the thing that
Right.
it does. And that's a big leap for a lot of people who get locked
Hmm.
into, well, it's very much about the thing that I create or the service I offer. That's the value of the organization. And I'm questioning that. Is that really the
Hmm.
value of the organization? Or is there something even beyond that?
Yeah,
Right.
that's so great. Um, Leon, is there anything that you'd like to share about, the Center for Transformational Coaching, the Deep Coaching Intensive, or just any of the work that you're currently doing?
Well, the invitation, thanks, is always there for people who are curious about the work that we've been speaking about today to have a look at the center. Just drop by our website. There's quite a bit about the Deep Coaching Intensive written there and what it means. The next one begins May, I think May 12th, and people can learn more about that and register. And of course, there's the book, A Shift in Being, available in Kindle and on Amazon. People are always welcome to grab a copy there, and that will introduce the work as well. And as we've been talking about, this is not just a book for coaches, it's a book for people who themselves recognize that they're on this path of transformation and are also interested in how this may then help them to support others in different ways on their growth journeys, no matter where they're at in their journeys. So you don't have to be a coach
Hmm.
at all to benefit from this work. We get many people coming through the center who have no coaching experience, who don't want to be coaches, but they understand that the work itself shifts something in the way that they engage with the world. And that's really the essence of what we're doing here.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
did a little brief snapshot of it, but here's the book. If you
Yep.
haven't seen it before, right there. I will make sure to share all the links to the center, and I'll share an Amazon link as well for the book.
Thank you.
And then if there's any other links that you want me to share, please feel free to fire them over to me. Any last things that you want to share, or anything that's left for you to bring to the conversation?
Well, I love that piece that we talked about prioritizing in life. And I just want to encourage everyone, you know, take a moment to sit down and just really reflect on, what to what degree are you putting your own journey of awakening and transformation at the core of your life, and really committing to that rather than the idea of dabbling. And then taking time to really listen within, what is it that you're really called to in that way, and to allow yourself to move in that direction, reprioritize as needed. I think that's such a valuable question and time to take for reflection. And I would just encourage everybody listening to do that.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Well, to end this for tonight, would you, it's funny, before I jumble my words, may I acknowledge you?
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd love to. Thank you for the opportunity. Leon, I did think about this slightly beforehand, but I'm really just going to practice from a place of being. And I really want to acknowledge you first for the innovator within you. I've kind of spoken to it in the conversation around, this creation that you brought to the world. The Center for Transformational Coaching, the Deep Coaching Intensive. Like, thank you for bringing this gift to all of us. I can speak for myself. It's been such a magical experience, and I know for so many others, it has been a life changing opportunity to be a part of. So thank you so much for your courage, your innovation in bringing this to the world, because it's impacting many of us.
Yeah.
I also
Thank
want
you.
to I'm not done. I also want to acknowledge you, truly for your connection to spirit, your connection to divinity. What I've truly felt from you in the time that I spent with you is like, the being that you bring is a gateway to spirit, a gateway to divinity. And to me, it's like it's a clearing, it's an opening for the rest of us, for me to sit in this and be like, like, look at this conversation that is happening. Look at this
Mm.
pathway that's being connected to spirit, this greater level of consciousness. It has been such a magical experience. And, I'm just so grateful to have somebody like you in my life to, really show me this magical pathway to transformation. So thank you so much for all that you
Well, I feel that. Thank you. Truly.
do.
Thank you. For me, this way of living, what I just call spirit infused living, is the pathway to what it means to be human.
Hmm.
That's it. It doesn't mean that we have to make it heavy and hard. Just infuse
Hmm.
lightly, beautifully, graciously. Thank you. Thank you.
Absolutely.
And just in response, I said this at the beginning of our conversation. I have loved how you have shown up for the work. You have brought energy, a keenness of mind, an open heart, a willingness to question, a willingness to do the hard work that this invites people to do. Doesn't
Hmm.
mean it was always easy. Doesn't mean you weren't struggling. But you were and are a light shining in this way. So as you lead your group, I hope, and I know, I should say, hope, I know you will continue to influence, because you've influenced even within the cohort that I've seen you be a part of. And you've influenced my life by inviting these conversations here in person. Your questions, you stand brightly. So thank you. I say that deeply and truly. Thank you.
Hmm. Thank you, Leon.
Yeah.
I so much appreciate it. Okay. Well, this is going to conclude our conversation for today. Thank you for everybody who had a chance to sit in. I will say, Leon, it's been funny because I put a tag that, hey, if you can't make it live, you know, please put a little note and that you want the replay, and I'll send it to you.
Yeah.
And it's been the highest response I've ever received. So, so
Replay. Perfect.
I'm excited to be able to share it, with others who are going to be able to find this, in the future, and also
Yeah.
with the audience who might get to watch at a later time. The one thing I will say to folks as well, that we didn't mention, but Leon has created a community. You'll have to share the full name, but
Mm.
I call it the TCC.
Yeah. Transformational Coaching Collective. Right.
Yeah, and I would say, folks, join us there. There's great
Mm.
conversations happening there. There's, this is really a continuation of this conversation. And yeah, I know that the audience that I have would greatly benefit from being a part of that community.
Yeah.
So
There's a
please
lot
come
going on
join.
in it. Check it out. Yeah. You can find a link to it on our website as well,
Yeah,
centerfortransformationcoaching.com.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to end us here. Have a good rest of your day, everybody, and thanks for tuning in.